Dear friends, welcome to another episode of Geopolitical and Military News. In this video, we will discuss a recent announcement made by Vladimir Putin, who stated that Russia intends to reassess its policy on the use of nuclear weapons in order to potentially employ small tactical nuclear warheads in Ukraine. In a statement made on June 20th, after visits to North Korea and Vietnam, Vladimir Putin said that Russia is considering making changes to its nuclear military doctrine. He justified this by stating that there have been changes in the threshold for the use of nuclear weapons by a foreign power, without specifying which power that might be. This is very likely related to statements made by Jens Stoltenberg, Secretary-General of NATO, who, just 3 days earlier, said that the alliance is considering putting its nuclear weapons on alert. However, Stoltenberg did not mention any changes to the threshold for the use of nuclear weapons, as Putin claimed. But what does Putin's statement really mean, and what new risks could this bring to the world? To answer this question, we need to understand what the Russian nuclear doctrine on the use of nuclear weapons is. The Russian nuclear doctrine on the use of nuclear weapons is a central component of Russia's security and defense strategy, reflecting both the country's historical background and its current threat perceptions. This doctrine is shaped by a combination of historical, geopolitical, and military factors and has evolved over the decades, particularly since the Cold War period. The current Russian nuclear doctrine on the use of nuclear weapons is detailed in a series of strategic documents and official statements. According to the latest military doctrine, the circumstances under which Russia envisions the use of nuclear weapons are as follows: in response to a nuclear attack, with Russia reserving the right to use its weapons in response to a nuclear attack against itself or its allies, in response to an attack with weapons of mass destruction, including chemical and biological weapons, and in response to a conventional attack that threatens the existence of the Russian state, with the doctrine allowing the use of nuclear weapons in response to a conventional aggression that poses an existential threat to the nation. Besides these circumstances, the Russian doctrine emphasizes deterrence capability, that is, the use of nuclear weapons as a means to prevent attacks by demonstrating the capability of devastating retaliation. The current format of the doctrine has evolved significantly since the Cold War, when the Soviet Union and the United States were engaged in an intense nuclear arms race. The initial Soviet doctrine emphasized mutually assured destruction, known as MAD, where any nuclear attack by one superpower would result in immediate and devastating retaliation, ensuring the annihilation of both. In the 1960s and 70s, in response to this doctrine, the Soviet Union developed a vast strategic nuclear capability, including intercontinental ballistic missiles, nuclear submarines, and strategic bombers. The Soviet doctrine also incorporated the idea of controlled escalation, where nuclear weapons could be used at different stages of a conflict, starting with lower-yield tactical weapons and gradually escalating to more strategic use. With the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, the Russian Federation inherited the vast Soviet nuclear arsenal, but also faced significant economic and military challenges. In the 1990s, Russia revised its nuclear doctrine to reflect the new geopolitical reality and its comparatively reduced capabilities. In 2000, already during the Putin era, Russia adopted a doctrine that allowed the use of nuclear weapons in response to large-scale conventional attacks that threatened the existence of the Russian state, marking a significant shift as, for the first time, the doctrine explicitly allowed the use of nuclear weapons in non-nuclear conflicts. In the 2010s, the Russian doctrine continued to evolve in response to changes in the global security environment and the military capabilities of NATO and other powers. In 2014, Russia published a new nuclear doctrine that reaffirmed the importance of nuclear weapons as a means of deterrence and defense. The 2014 doctrine introduced the concept of escalate to de-escalate, suggesting that Russia could employ limited nuclear weapons to contain a conflict and force the adversary to back down. This concept has been widely debated and interpreted as an attempt to compensate for Russia's conventional inferiority relative to NATO. In 2020, Russia published a nuclear policy document further clarifying the circumstances for the use of nuclear weapons. The document specifies that Russia may use nuclear weapons in response to reliable information about the launch of ballistic missiles against Russia or its allies, And it also envisions the use of nuclear weapons in response to the use of nuclear weapons or other weapons of mass destruction against Russia or its allies, as well as in response to aggression against critical Russian infrastructure whose compromise could undermine the nuclear response capability and conventional aggression that threatens the very existence of the Russian state. Therefore, by saying that he will alter this doctrine, Putin is indicating that he will make it more flexible and more consistent with the current situation of Russia, which has been involved in a large-scale war with no end in sight since February 2022 when it invaded Ukraine. Even the smallest of tactical nuclear bombs has a yield thousands of times greater than that of a large conventional bomb with 700 kilograms of explosives. Therefore, with a handful of these small bombs, Putin could destroy all known Ukrainian depots and bases. As everyone knows, the use of nuclear weapons in a modern conflict will open the doors to a completely unknown new world, in which conventional regional conflicts will begin to be resolved with the use of increasingly powerful nuclear weapons. Putin says that the weapons to be used in Ukraine are of small yield, but, as I said, a small nuclear bomb with a small yield is capable of killing thousands or tens of thousands of people in a fraction of a second. And if Putin does this, what will stop NATO from supplying small-yield tactical nuclear weapons to Ukraine, claiming to be merely balancing the fight? With the Russian invasion becoming increasingly costly and its conclusion ever more distant, Putin is increasingly tempted to play the nuclear card, something that, if done, will inaugurate a new era of terror in the world, an era of nuclear weapons trivialization where the destruction of the world could literally be just around the corner. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to help the channel grow. Until next time,